We are tonight's entertainment.
You can't handle the truth.
The fire rises.
Pizza time.
You're a wizard, Harry.
So it begins.
You know how much I sacrifice?
You think that's air you're breathing?
Groovy.
I don't have friends. I got family.
We are Sex People! 1, 2, 3, 4!
Craft Services.
Hello, everybody. We're in for another Trentless intro. He's off shooting a movie with friend Jackson Clark, friend of the show. Unfortunately, we couldn't make the timings work, but no worries. We still have an episode for you this week, which means we still have an intro for you this week, which means I just ate something this week. And that thing would be, so just a little backstory. I went to the AMC Dine-In Theater, which I normally don't really like to go to because they have the lights by your chair so that you can see your food, and I don't know, it's all sort of weird. The people that go there are sort of, at least it's the Bridgewater Commons Mall. I don't know, you always get stuck with some fucking annoying teens that are just gonna be loud and talk during the movie, or people bring their kids because it's a dine-in theater and then they just start on their iPads or whatever. But every now and then, when Sophia and I want to see a movie, just like have a quick night out, friend of the show, Sophia Alexis, by the way, we will go to the AMC Dine-In Theater, and usually we're watching a horror movie or just a movie that we're not as, that's a movie that we don't feel, or at least I don't feel, needs to be seen on such a massive screen. And this week we saw Together, the Dave Franco, Alison Brie movie. It was pretty good. And there we bought, with $20 worth of AMC rewards that I've accumulated over the past couple of months, we got buffalo wings and fries, and Sophia snuck in some ginger ale from my home. And I gotta say, they're pretty good. I've been a little bit miffed with the AMC Dine-In menu because they've severely shrunk it down since I moved to Bridgewater. So since 2011. They used to have a lot more options all the way up until the point that I was working there. So that's like 2019. And then I think post-pandemic, they really consolidated the menu. But the wings were good. The fries were also good. And they came right before the movie, so it wasn't annoying, having to talk to the waiter as the movie's happening. But yeah, go check out Together, though not before you finish checking out the rest of this episode. Speaking of which, let's cue the intro. Welcome back to Craft Services, where we talk about the movies. Each week we talk about a film and hopefully have a crew member of that film to talk with us about their experience working on the picture. This week, we've got production designer Elliott Hostetter on to talk about his work production designing Ari Aster's Eddington. This was a super cool guest. He was a super cool guy. And Eddington, a movie that I really liked and Trent really liked. And yeah, I was really happy with this interview. He really gets into some cool factoids about the movie, a little bit about Ari Aster, about his time working in the industry, how he worked his way up, moving to LA, all some good stuff. He was a super cool guy and was really game to talk with us. And he was very, very chill about some technical difficulties, which I'll get into in the outro, because right now I kind of just want to let you, the audience, listen to this very cool interview. So why don't we just cue the interview? Hello, everybody, and welcome to our interview with Elliott Hostetter. He's the production designer behind such films as Spring Breakers, The Neon Demon, Bones and All, and our film for today, Ari Aster's Eddington. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Glad to be here. Hey, everybody.
So just to start off, can you talk about when you first wanted to become a production designer?
I'm from Indianapolis, and there's no film there. But when I was 16, I was working at my parents' restaurant, and all these very exotic-looking people started coming in a couple days a week. It was a film crew, and the production designer was maybe 6'1". She wore all black. She had long black hair. She was rock and roll looking. Her name was Therese Dupre, and sort of, I feel like I saw her as a 16-year-old, like, who is this person? That's when I guess first time I wanted to be a production designer.
And can you talk about when you first started finding yourself on set in that capacity?
Yeah, I had a funny route as I went, like I came up working in the art department. So I, first started as a PA then. I was a carpenter and a painter and a set dresser and eventually props. So I did all these things sort of like working on other movies. And simultaneously, I would design small little movies, so sort of just after college, I met these two guys named Jay Van Hoy and Lars Knudsen, who had this company called Parts and Labor at the time. Jay's girlfriend worked at a coffee shop with my girlfriend in Texas. And so we hit it off, and they were doing a very small movie. And I sort of, I told them that they needed to hire me, and they were naive enough to do it. And so that's when I started. I helped them on a very small project, and I helped them on a few little projects. Then we didn't see each other for several years. I went on to work under various designers, on various projects in the art department, and they made a name for themselves doing a lot of movies. And it's sort of like 10 years later, it came back around.
And can you talk about, because on your IMDb at least, you have a lot of movies as a proper remaster, and then can you talk about that first step into that next big leap for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was really like a series of little leaps in my career, I had moved to Texas after college, and my sort of impulse in moving to Austin was to live that slacker lifestyle, because I had been a real hard worker in my younger days, and I wanted to like live a little and not have the pressures of a career and everything. So I moved to Austin because it was like an interesting artistic community, and it was somewhere where there was less career pressure. And then I quickly got to working in film. It just kind of snowballed. So I just kind of went to where my interests were and where my skills lended themselves, and the construction department was great, good, a lot of wonderful people, but then set dressing was a little bit more interesting to me. And then like I found a mentor who was an on-set dresser, which is a job that I don't know if people know that well, but is a very particular job on a film set where you're really close with you're part of the filmmaking crew, you're on set, and you're part of the action, but you're sort of your own unique department. So that became like where I really focused for several years. And I just got like, working in a smaller marketplace like Texas, you just end up working on whatever is shooting in town. And I just had a really lucky experience in that the movie Tree of Life came to Austin. And that movie like really transformed my experience, where instead of it being just a job, it became a passion. Jack Fisk was the designer, and he was such a huge influence and mentor. And again, just seeing somebody who not only like their work is lovely, but just as a human is someone to aspire to. He's just lived just a beautiful, amazing life full of like meaning, and the movie felt meaningful, and it felt like something that I could give my whole life to. And that's when it really inspired me. And I think after that, it's just a confluence of there was a lot of energy going around. And then I had a kid at the same time, and that really motivated me to take it a little bit more seriously, the opportunities that were presenting themselves,
Yeah, I believe you're in LA now. At what point in your career did you move there, and why?
So around the same time of Tree of Life, I guess it was just afterwards, those same producers from early on, Lars and Jay, had they did a movie Beginners with Mike Mills, and they became friends with Miranda July, and she was making a film, and they recommended me to her. At the same time, Spike Jonze shot a little short in Austin that I got to work with him on. It was an Arcade Fire thing called The Suburbs. And there were just like, there was a momentum that was happening where I was all of a sudden, people who I really, admired and looked up to were interested in working with me. And so that's when my career started to, take off. But I designed a couple movies in LA. I did The Future, and I did a Roman Coppola movie called A Glimpse into the Mind of Charles Swan III. And in between, I did Spring Breakers, and I did a movie, Night Moves. So there were a couple years when my son was like 0 to 3 years old, where I still have my residence in Texas, but I wasn't living there. I was working more in LA in films and commercials. And, my wife and I had said to each other, like, how can we make this work? Like, where can we be where I might be able to both be a father and do this job? So that's when we moved.
And sort of moving to the film of the day, can you talk about meeting with Ari Aster for this movie and sort of what your preparation for Eddington looked like?
Yeah. Ari and I actually met on Hereditary. That producer from those early days when I didn't know anybody, Lars Knudsen, became, he was Ari's producer, and he produced Hereditary. So he introduced us. And the timing just wasn't right at that moment, but we were both admirers of each other. And by the time Eddington came back around, we talked again, and we hit it off. And when I first came on board with Eddington, the first time I met in person, we were in Mexico. We were looking at a small town in Mexico that they had plans to turn into Eddington. They had already sort of scouted a little bit. It was like in the middle of nowhere. Really interesting way to meet people is coming in with this sort of specific, framework for the project. And so I came on board. We looked at the town. We sort of started to make plans. This was before the movie really, begun. And I said, if we're going to make this in a Mexican town, I really need to like do my own scout of New Mexico towns to really know what the hell I'm going to do there. So I convinced them to let me take a trip around New Mexico for a week by myself. I took a small trip with Ari as well for a couple of days. At the end of it, I guess how it went is at the end of it, I met Ari, and we drove around for a couple of days together. So that was a really, formative time for me to be able to just there's always this little bit of time at the beginning of a movie where it's, just me and the director and the script, or, there's the producers and everybody too, but where I can have it a little bit, hold it as my own for a minute without all the noise and the complications of the production. And I could just explore into the story. And I thought that trip really, those moments are usually really formative for me and like coming up with the overall approach to the movie. And Ari and I just had a blast. And that was sort of the beginning. And then months went by. The financial situation really changed. The dollar versus the peso changed a lot. And the calculus for A24 changed. And we, several months later, we were talking about shooting in New Mexico again. Then we took another trip all around for a week together. And it was this kind of great exploration. And that time in the fall, Darius Kanji joined us and the producers, and we took a trip all together and ended up in Truth or Consequences, which I fell in love with that town as Eddington on that first trip. It was the last place I went. I wasn't even intending to scout it for any reason, but I sort of stood on top of the hill by the water tower there, and I could see the whole movie play out.
Can you talk about how much was built or what happened outside of that, the real town that you found?
Well, it was it's a really interesting and particular way to build. Like the town really, every location made sense geographically. The gun shop was 2 blocks from the sheriff's office, was 2 blocks from where the riots were. Everything laid out in reality for us. And we were able to do that because the town was so open to working with us and was so friendly to us. So like we would just look at buildings and say, that could be a good sheriff's office. That could be a good bar, So we built all the sets that we built really were in situ, on location. So we took an old barbecue restaurant that was great because it had a great storefront. So much of the scenes were playing inside and outside, where you would see from it, you would see Pedro Pascal outside of the window, and you'd see Joe walk outside. There was so much of this interplay between interior and exterior that it really was like essential for us to be able to work that way. But we would take an old barbecue place and transform that into the sheriff's office. An old abandoned building became the old bar, and all the storefronts, we just kind of like puzzle pieced our way around the town. And there was a lot of like really wonderful, like accidental discoveries that way. Like the scene where Joe falls through the roof of the museum and goes through the museum. That was like a solution to a very difficult geographical problem we were having. And that only, like, the museum was right there next to the hill. We needed the museum in that place, but it wasn't like something that was scripted that then we made happen. We just solved a problem by going to the museum.
That's crazy. That's one of my favorite gags in the movie.
Yeah, me too. And it's like working in that sort of way of discovery and like practicality is really, really a fun way to go about it. I love when it makes it in the movie and makes it better.
You mentioned Darius Kanji for a second. That's the cinematographer, and obviously you have to work with him to sort of create the cohesive look. Can you talk about that collaboration at all and how much the two of you coordinated?
Yeah, I mean, Darius is just like a wonderful, wonderful human and obviously like legendary cinematographer. Again, like the process of scouting is just such a cool bonding experience where we're all looking and we're looking at the world together. And Darius is like, he's an older gentleman, but he's like a child when he's scouting. He's full of wonder, full of like openness to the world, and like just kind of sharing that initially on the scout and being able to, like see each other's proclivities. It was like a really amazing process. And then Darius and I, early in the prep, we would take walks on the weekend. We would just spend time together, not even talking about movies or whatever, just life and just becoming friends, And I think having a friendship within the working framework really just makes it so much richer. So I don't know, like we were mutual admirers and we became really close.
I guess this applies to any director, but I love how Ari Aster's movies look, but this was your first collaboration with him. But are you taking into consideration in your design, say, a director's overarching how their movies have looked in the past?
I try not to be limited by that because I feel like, just approaching each new movie like a new beginning is kind of, for me, the best approach so that something feels fresh and new. Ari, like Hereditary and this movie have very little in common as far as that goes. I'll understand like his tendencies by watching some, more of the way that he films things or, more of some of the rest of the approach. As far as the aesthetic goes, I assume he's hiring somebody new because he doesn't want to inherit anything that he's done before. But at the same time, like, I'm just trying to draw out whatever's most important to him. For instance, the dolls in Louise's dolls, those are full Ari. There's no getting around that. Like, and we tried a few different ways of like developing those dolls, of having other artists maybe, draw them or make them, but really they're Ari's dolls. They're very particular to him. And I just realized early on, it kind of felt like only Ari could really realize those, and if I had someone else doing it, he would give them so many notes and he'd just keep trying to push them into what he wanted to do. But Ari is, he can draw. He's a great, he's a great drawer. So like we just had sessions where he'd just sit in my office. I'd give him a notebook and I'd give him paper, and he would just, the more immediate and impulsive, and it came from him, the quicker and easier the process was. So it's more a process of drawing that out of him and then like fleshing it out into the real world, and like shepherding out his vision is a little bit more of what, how I work.
So obviously a lot of this movie takes place on phone screens, and just wondering what level of involvement and how much, I don't want to say effort, because obviously, you're trying hard on everything, but like what level of involvement are you working with on trying to get that accurate?
Yeah, Ari joked a lot. He called it "Screens the Movie," which I thought it's pretty appropriate. It's just like so many screens. I think that we had a lot of discussions early on, but when it came to the technical with the phones and what, to be honest, like I was happy to have somebody else who dealt a little closer with the phones. But I did, one of the funny ways that I did interact with the phones a little bit was at the end of the movie. I helped out a little bit with second unit stuff, and we would shoot inserts of phones, or we did several shots over a couple days. But you think it's just an insert of the phone, and you get it pretty precise. Every time I'd show Ari one of the shots that I did of an insert of the phone, he wanted it more precise. He was so meticulous about the framing and the exact angle and everything about those phones. It was really mind blowing. But as far as design work goes, I didn't really do all that much with phones.
I'm just curious with like any given set, say the police station or something. Are you, as the production designer, are you just like sketching out, okay, I'm going to need a desk here, and a few things on the walls? Or how basically are you delivering, how are you getting exactly what you want without like being the one shopping for the stuff or finding it? Or how do you get what you want down the line?
So I think a lot of the way that I approached the set was also kind of from a blocking standpoint for the scenes. So we got the space early on, and just thinking about first of all, it started with the interplay from the scenes outside to the inside and where it sat in the town. And then we had Joaquin and Ari were there very early on, and we started to block out where things needed to be in there. So we just got a few desks, or before we had desks, we just put a couple chairs, and we start to run through the scenes in the space. And Ari's very specific about how he imagines the shots and where he wants. So we start to, there starts to be a physical framework for how we arrange the space. There was a lot of concern early on about how much are we going to deviate from the reality of a small town sheriff's office, because you can't really, I don't know how much you pick up as a viewer in the audience, but they walk in through this side entrance, like for the public walks in to the sheriff's office through what is a little library. It's the town library, actually. And so like we sort of made these funny decisions that like just reacting to the space that we found ourselves in and deciding how much we want to change or not. So it's like just kind of a series of decisions in that way. When it comes to the specifics of the set dressing and the character of the place, a lot of my inspiration did come from those trips that we took around New Mexico, where we would go visit with sheriff stations. And, there was a certain amount that you can find online, but really was from being in these real places. And a lot of the stuff that we'd really seen, that's what ended up being on the set. And the set decorator is Adam Willis. And Adam and I have worked together since Spring Breakers. And I love Adam to death. And we were very, very close. We lived together on this movie for a certain amount in Truth or Consequences. We've done that a lot, actually, in the past. And we're just really close collaborators. I know if I tell Adam what the important elements are, he's going to just transcend it. So there's a kind of a trusting, creative relationship that makes that possible. And his team, there was his assistant decorator Molly Ebner was just incredible too. There was a passion from all of us to the approach to the set that I think they really nailed it. But starts with like Ari's specific blocking, like his vision for how he wants to shoot it, and us finding our way together.
Guys, I don't know about you. I thought that part 1 interview was fucking baller. as the kids say. Yeah, thanks so much again to Elliott Hostetter for showing up to this interview, for talking to us for like an hour, and for dealing with our various technical difficulties. So usually I don't really like to give a peek behind the curtains, but this time I think it makes our guest look cool, or, like a cool dude. So I'll do it. Yeah, so the last 2 times that we've done interviews, we've had various technical difficulties with the site that we use, Squadcast, not to put them up for blast, but also this is kind of like the one thing your site's supposed to be able to do is record podcast interviews. And the last 2 times you've kind of failed me. So for our Superman interview with William Hoy, fantastic interview, by the way, everything was fine, except when I went to go download the interview, it showed that there wasn't anything. Now, thankfully, Squadcast does have this thing called a cloud backup, which basically records, a secondary recording alongside the main recording. So I was able to recover it, and, obviously the interview went out. But usually Squadcast is pretty good. But then this time we were doing it with Elliott, and at one point I just cut out completely and they couldn't hear me. And so we had to stop the recording and start again. Then a second time, it just fucking shut down. We were completely kicked off the site. And then we recorded it for a third time and it was fine. But yeah, what the fuck? But Elliott was super cool about it. He really couldn't have been nicer about the whole ordeal. Made a few jokes. We referenced Spring Breakers, and Trent did a little spring break forever, which made our guest laugh, which I was really happy about because he, worked on that movie, which, maybe you'll get to hear that in part 2 of our interview. Gee, I really hope that interview, like this episode, comes out next week, Sunday, as all episodes of this podcast do every Sunday. And I hope that the audience can, follow all of the updates that we've got on Instagram and Twitter. Oh, wait, the audience can do that. And the episode will be up on Sunday, 5 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So thank you so much again to Elliott Hostetter for, partaking in this interview. Thank you so much to his team for setting it all up. Thank you to Ari Aster for making Eddington the film of the week and next week. And no thank you to Trent for not making it, but it's not his fault. It was all sort of last minute anyways. So we'll see you next week, guys. Trent will be there. Bye.